I used to love seeing fireflies at night outside in this nice looking suburbs. Does anyone get to see them much anymore anywhere? Do you see them here? I see fireflies.
Yeah.
You do? Where you are in Brooklyn?
Yeah. Little lawns.
Bet you moved. So I used to love them so much that I would sometimes try to capture someone in a jar and keep it overnight, thinking, well, now I've got a piece of that beauty that I can look at tomorrow and enjoy all day, and the next day, and the next day. But when you do that, all you've got is this. Right? It's like a real half-assed, it's like a facsimile of an experience. So my wanting to cling to something so beautiful and fleeting resulted in a crappy experience. So a Robert Frost poem that I really like. It says, nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay. This dukkha experience, or this feeling of suffering or discomfort, or that things aren't satisfactory ever, I think is rooted in a complete misunderstanding of impermanence, a complete resistance to it. So resisting that things are just going to change. It's the nature of things that they constantly change. So we either want to freeze an experience, we want to keep something frozen in time forever that's pleasing to us, whether it's our appearance, whether it's how a relationship feels at its peak, or an object. It could be anything. It could be a mind state. Some people try to duplicate the same mind state repeatedly because they just get so stuck on that experience, and that's how I think addictive behavior. So a lot of it, there's this link with impermanence and time, right? So living in this world where we have to work with linear time, it's sort of like a stream. And even when we're meditating, what we're doing is practicing working with impermanence. Because when we meditate, things are shifting so much from one minute to the other. Sensations change, thoughts change, sounds from out there change, our attention shifts. So that right there is what's, I think, so great about practice. Whether you're sitting formally or practicing in your everyday life, is realizing how do I work and ride on impermanence like a wave rather than try to resist it. Most of our suffering or most of our unhappiness comes from this resistance to impermanence. So either wanting things to stay the same, right, or looking for pleasure in things that are going to change, which is basically everything. So by looking for pleasure or happiness, seeking pleasure or happiness in any way outside of ourselves, it dooms us to failure. So that's an excellent point, because there's something about those states, like being in despair or depression, that has this very freezing effect. That's what's so dangerous about those mind states. When you're happy or feeling fulfilled or excited, it kind of feels lighter, it's very fluid, and it inspires something different. Depression, anxiety, fear, there's something more heavy about it and solid and frozen. And that's what's scary about that, is that's what leads people to think this is never going to change. And at its worst, you might kill yourself, or you might do heavy drugs, or you might engage in a behavior that's going to make the situation worse. The one you want to relieve you making it worse, or you just eat too much ice cream. That's a minor version, but that's what's important to remember with regard to impermanence. That yes, there's an opportunity in impermanence. So impermanence doesn't mean everything dies. So sorry folks. Impermanence means that yes, things can get better. And was that campaign they had for LGBT kids? It gets better, right? It's true. Things aren't always awful. It doesn't always feel the way it did in high school. are always changing. Were you going to say something?
Can I share my favorite poem, which actually I now realize is about impermanence as well? It's by William Blake, and it's 4 lines, and it's kind of in Old English, but so I'm paraphrasing it a little because I don't remember exactly. He who to himself would bind a joy does the winged life destroy. But he who kisses the joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise.
Wow, that's really perfect. So you can just sort of appreciate things as they are, or you can resent them as they are. Or, see, part of what happens too is we appreciate things as they are so much that we are aware of impermanence, so we're afraid it's going to change. And then we get anxious and we can't fully enjoy what we have in it. So that's another little trap too. It's like, I think I've told the story about my mother and our conversations about the weather before, which was hysterical. I should actually record it once and then play it for you. She would kill me, but like, sometimes she can be a bit pessimistic. So this is typical, like the most beautiful weather you can imagine, like 78 and dry and partly sun, like perfect, picture perfect weather. And I'll call her and I'm like, isn't it great out? And I'm outside. I'm like, isn't it a beautiful day, Mom? She's like, yeah, but now I heard it's going to rain tomorrow. Well, I suppose it's going to rain eventually, Fran. But that really illustrates, right? That's what we do. It's all hard to just appreciate things as they are. We want more of it, or we want it to stick around, we want it to change. But the weather is the weather. Weather's going to do what weather does. Just as it just turned to summer a few days ago. And it's going to turn to fall. And it's going to be winter. And this is what happens. And it's okay. It's great. It's funny when you said that, it reminded me of how linked, I guess, it is to non-self. That we're changing so much. So if we accept impermanence, then we have to accept non-self, and vice versa, I guess.
You say if we accept impermanence, we have to accept non-self.
Non-self.
What is non-self?
There is no separate, solid self as we tend to think there is. That we are always constantly changing moment to moment to moment. So you're a different person than you were 5 minutes ago. You're a different person than you were 20 years ago. You'll be a different person in 30 seconds. Something's always shifting. And there's no one thing we can point to where I say, well, that's Sebastian. This is how I can define him in this certain solid set of parameters. That's him. That's it. What makes you who you are? What makes any of us who we are? Some people think it's their job. Right? So what you do is who you are, but then jobs get lost. Or you get fired, or you hate a job, or whatever, or you can't find a job. Or some people think they are, I don't know, they're their appearance. So some people go crazy trying to maintain an appearance. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to look good. It's not bad. Like I do things to try to look decent. I mean, if I didn't care, I wouldn't. I wear sunblock, or I don't know. I don't eat as much as I'd like to. I like eating a lot. So, but at the same time, at what point do we realize, are we just this body, and do we have to keep it a certain way all the time? What's the function of our body? You mentioned the mochi thing. I remember also when I was a kid, I used to like take bubble gum, and I would stick a piece in my mouth and I'd chew it, suck all the flavor out of it, and then once it didn't taste as good, like it would peak at a certain point, I would spit it out and put another piece in my mouth, and suck all the flavor out of it, and spit it out. And that's kind of what we do with life, right? Rather than just, so can you appreciate the gum when you just put it in your mouth, and you're chewing it, then that little sweetness peak, and then it kind of goes away, and then you're just sort of chewing rubber, and then just noticing every part of that is okay. But I think our tendency to want to experience pleasurable feelings keeps us trapped too. It's a very basic human tendency, of course, to want a basic degree of comfort. We want to be fed, and we want somewhere to sleep. That's perfectly normal. But sometimes it gets so extreme that we want to constantly experience nothing but pleasurable thoughts and emotions all the time, as if that's the way it should always be. And it's kind of not. And like you mentioned before, how would you know, also I guess to continue with what you're saying, how would you know what well feels like if you don't feel unwell? How would we know what joy is if we never feel misery? So that's why we can be grateful for those times when we're miserable, having a hard time. And we can even make use of that, so those important. Maybe we can take some time to discuss, like, how do we, as personal as you want to get or not, how do we resist impermanence?
Fear of commitment.
Fear of commitment.
Yeah.
How do you feel that relates to impermanence?
Well, the inevitable loss of any relationship that we have. So fearing to get into a relationship.
So knowing that either through breakup or divorce or death, everything comes to an end.
I think addiction to routine, whether it's personal routine or I think work, just make it very, very, I mean, I have a lot of tasks to do and I have to do them, but I think that sort of fends off changes. And this routine, this is what I do, and it's always going to be like this, and so.
So what's the downside to that then, if you feel like you're rigid maybe about your days?
Well, I think I don't get surprised.
Okay.
And surprise, well, it can be very nice. You can open up new vistas, meet new people, find out new things, change. I mean, it's really about change. Fear of change, I think.
Appearance, whether it's how a relationship feels at its peak, or an object, it could be anything, it could be a mind state. Some people try to duplicate the same mind state repeatedly because they just get so stuck on that experience, and that's how I think addictive behavior. So a lot of it, there's this link with it. I used to love seeing fireflies at night outside in this nice looking suburbs. Does anyone get to see them much anymore anywhere? Do you ever see them here?
On my
see
block.
fireflies.
Yeah.
You do? Where you are in Brooklyn?
Yeah. Little lawns.
That you moved. So I used to love them so much that I would sometimes try to capture some in a jar and keep it overnight, thinking, well, now I've got a piece of that beauty that I can look at tomorrow and enjoy all day, and the next day and the next day. But when you do that, all you've got is this. Right? It's like a real half-assed, it's like a facsimile of an experience. So my wanting to cling to something so beautiful and fleeting resulted in a crappy experience. So the Robert Frost poem that I really like. Does nature ever, I think, is rooted in a complete misunderstanding of impermanence, a complete resistance to it. So resisting that things are just going to change. It's the nature of things that they constantly change. So we either want to freeze an experience, right? We want to keep something frozen in time forever that's pleasing to us, whether it's our first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold, her early leaves a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay. This dukkha we experience, or this feeling of suffering or discomfort, or that things are satisfactory,